May 2nd, 2012. The mass market printing for the Look For Me series has been delayed for several reasons. The main reason is that we've had some technical problems with the production. The first problem is that we had to make sure that the finished product was divisible by 16 in terms of number of pages. The first thing I thought I'd do is bump it up to the next nearest page count. And so we had to get an estimate as to what that cost would be. And it was enough extra dollars that I thought, well, maybe we better bump it down. And so that's what I did. And in the process of bumping it down, of course, I had to reflow all the pages within the program. And that caused some problems. So I decided to get some proofs made so I could read through it and make sure I didn't have any formatting errors as a result of reflowing the text. This is for across all 4 books. And so when I read the proofs, then I found some additional errors. Not any big thing, but errors that I don't want to go into the mass market printing. So I've had to redo those, had to correct those. And then when I thought, well, okay, I'm about ready to submit it for printing, the company that I had selected to do the printing, which is a very large mass market paperback printer, they kind of copped an attitude of, well, we're not going to, they didn't say this, but it translated to this, we're not going to provide you service. We're not going to look at your pages and your covers in advance to advise you on whether or not they're acceptable for printing. And I was a little taken back by that. They said they'd do it, but they were going to charge me some exorbitant rate per hour. I think it was $80 an hour to look at my submission to determine whether or not it would print right. And I kind of thought, that should be included in the print job. The make ready, I am paying for the make ready, even though I'm submitting PDF files that are ready to go. I am paying for the make ready, the pre-press already. That's already built into the price. And so when I submitted the material to be looked at to answer the question, is this ready to go? And I got that response back that they were going to charge me for examining the material to determine whether or not it was ready to go. I looked at that and I said, are you kidding me? So what I did is I went back on the internet to look for a competitor. I found a company that had some pretty good credentials. Let's call it Company B. And Company B, they looked good, and I called and talked to one of the salespeople, and their attitude was 180 degrees different from Company A. I mean, they really wanted to help. The service was primary, and I thought, oh, good, okay, I found a competitor. We'll just get the job done at Company B instead of Company A. So the lady submitted my quote, or submitted my project for quotation, and she hurried it up. I mean, normally it takes longer than what she was able to get it quoted for. And she came back to me with a quote, and lo and behold, it was more than twice as much as Company A. So I wrote her back and I said, that's just unacceptable. And so she looked at it and she said, oh, well, here's the reason. There was a difference in paper and, some other things. We weren't comparing apples to apples. So she resubmitted the quote, and she came back with another number. Well, it was still enough higher than the Company A for me to tell her I just can't justify, even though you're going to provide service and the other company is not, I can't justify the huge dollar difference between Company A and Company B. So she was very nice, and she said, well, when the thing's a big bestseller and you need lots and lots of copies, come back to us, and maybe we can do you a better job, with quantity, which I'm sure is true. So I guess now I'm stuck with going back to company A. I didn't want to do that because, service is important to me. And it's pretty obvious if I'm not getting service at this point and I haven't even given them any money, in other words, they haven't closed the deal yet, and I'm not getting any service, well, what's it going to be like when I send them my money? They'll have no incentive then to try to track my business at all. The other thing that irritated me about Company A is I told them it was going to be a cash deal. I was going to write a check for the print job, and they said, "Well, we'll get you submitted to accounting and get you set up with an account with a company." I said, "Okay." So accounting sent me some documents to fill out, which included business references and all sorts of things like that. And so I filled out their forms and I sent it back to them. Well, the first thing that became pretty obvious is that since I've always been a cash and carry type of businessman, I've done business with a variety of companies over the last 30 years, and particularly in the publishing business the last 15 years. In the fireworks business the last 25, 26 years. I've got a pretty long track record of paying my bills. But the thing is, I tend to pay up front. When I buy something, I pay for it either the day that the service is rendered or, prior to the service being rendered. That's just the way I am. I don't do credit. I don't do terms. I don't like being billed and pay later. I don't like interest. And of course, this is a detriment to me now in dealing with this big giant company that prints books for a lot of different people. They look at me like they're not sure that they want to offer me an account because I'm probably the most liquid person they've ever dealt with. And I don't have even though I do have an impeccable credit rating, I don't have a credit history because I don't do credit. So anyway, that created a snag, and so then they finally came back to me and said, well, we're not going to open an account for you. You can pay us 100% of the money up front, and then we'll print your job. And that was a little offensive to me because typically in the printing business, you don't pay up front, even though I don't mind, and I was fully intending to do that anyway. Typically in the printing business, you pay when the product is printed and turned over to you. And in some cases, if it's a big job, it'll be 50-50, 60-40, something like that, where you pay half of it up front and then you pay half upon delivery. The reason you don't want to pay the full amount up front on a print job is because if the printer messes up and doesn't meet your specifications, if you've already paid, you have no leverage to get them to do the job over or to fix whatever it is that they messed up. I mean, you just have to totally trust them. Whereas, if you're paying half up front and half on delivery, then the printer has an incentive to make sure you're satisfied so that they'll get the rest of their money. And that's typical in the print business in big jobs. In little jobs, a lot of times printers, they just get paid when they deliver the product. They don't get anything up front. And that way the consumer has total say over whether or not the print job is acceptable. And most printers, I've dealt with printers for many, many years, most printers, they do their level best to satisfy the customer. And there are all kinds of things that can go wrong in printing. But the good printers, they recognize that and they do everything they can to avoid those problem areas. So anyway, Company B, they wanted, I think it was a 40-60 deal, 40% up front, 60% upon delivery, or it might have been vice versa, 60-40. No problem. But then they wanted a substantially larger fee than Company A. So these kind of technical things, I mean, these are not insurmountable problems. They're definitely going to be things that will get worked out, but it does create a lot of delay. I had hoped by now, it's the 2nd of May 2012, I had hoped by now that I'd have books in hand, and the delay from the editorial aspect, the delay from the financial aspect, the delay from the service issue. Here we are, books aren't even going on the press yet. So we're a couple months behind, and I don't particularly like that, but there's not much I can do about it. Another thing that's been a holdup that's been kind of frustrating, and is the reason the service issue came up in the first place, is that I don't know how to make a barcode. I understand what barcodes are. A barcode is nothing but a series of black and white lines with different widths and different spacing. And all that is, it's a way for a machine to read in zeros and ones a code that represents numbers. And most barcodes, and there's a whole bunch of different kinds of barcodes, but most barcodes give you two pieces of information. They give you the number that corresponds to the manufacturer. That's the first half of the barcode. And then they give a number that corresponds to the product from that manufacturer. Then that can be entered into their system, and they can put price and inventory information and so on and so forth in their computer based upon that barcode. It's a great system to keep track of things. But I didn't know how to generate a barcode. I'd never done it before. And so what I ultimately did is I went on the internet, and apparently now I've discovered there's all kinds of free barcode generators where you just type in your numbers and the machine does it for you. And a variety of companies provide the free service so that they can then sell you barcode readers and labels and associated equipment. But I didn't know how to do all of that. I had to learn it, and I had asked this printer if they could assist me, and the answer basically was no, not unless you pay us. I think it was $80 an hour. And I'm thinking, my attitude is, you don't have my business yet. This is something that'll take a person on your end that understands it 10 minutes to describe to me, 10 minutes to help me get through. It's not rocket science. But they didn't want to do it, and so I was just put in my lap. Okay, I got to go generate the barcodes that go with my products. All right, fine. I mean, they're just a printer. Maybe their attitude is they don't want to help you do anything, which I don't understand, because if I was a printer and I was looking at printing 20,000 copies of something for somebody, and they were having trouble because it's their first rodeo, the first time they've done anything like this, I think I'd be bending over backwards to serve them so that I could get their business, on the outside chance that later on I'll get more of their business. And that's one of the problems I think we have in America today, is that service is nothing. Service is low on the totem pole for lots of companies. And it's a shame, because here I am, a small company trying to produce a product, go through the manufacturing process, produce a product, and put it on the marketplace in order to generate activity. And there doesn't seem to be anybody that really wants to help you do that. which, bottom line, that's fine. That's business in the year 2012. It's completely different than business 20 years ago, business 40 years ago. I actually did produce some mass market paperbacks back in the 80s, The Land of the Nunch and Yearning to Understand. And I tell people that they had marginal success. I sold enough copies where it was a successful project, but I didn't make a ton of money on it. And the books are still, as far as I'm concerned, they're still good books, and I still have copies for sale. And I do sell copies from time to time. Yearning to Understand, the last time I sold copies was to a museum about, I'm going to say 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago. It's amazing that something that was produced in the 80s still sells. Now that was a science book. It was not fiction. Fiction is much more difficult to sell. But anyway, technically there have been some holdups, some hurdles. I'm moving forward on it. It's still probably going to be another 2 months before I have books. So this is May, end of June, maybe the 1st of July. I'll have books. I didn't want to wait that long, but what the heck? If the books are really, really successful, which I think they will be, this will just be part of the story. How Company A didn't want to help me do what I needed to do to get the product to market, and I'll always remember that. I'll always remember, as the book becomes more and more successful, I'm going to be reluctant to go back to the first printer for additional print runs if there's somebody else that can produce like kind and quality at the same price. And hopefully over time the number of copies we print will go up dramatically in each print run. And generally that means in the printing business that the price will come down. Interesting thing about printing, I've been interested in printing since I was very, very young, since I was a kid, interested in writing things and reproducing them. My brother and I had a hectograph, which most people don't even know what that is. And this was something that he bought from the, I think it was the classified ads in Popular Mechanics or Popular Science or something like that, which was a magazine that he read all the time. And a hectograph was a little wooden box, and incidentally, I still have it. I don't know where it is, but I still have it. It's in the archives here someplace. It's a little wooden box made out of masonite, and you mix up a jelly, basically. I don't know what it was, some kind of gelatin, and you pour it into this wooden box. Then you type your copy, your whatever you wanted to reproduce, on a special paper that put ink onto another paper. It was almost like typing on carbon paper onto another sheet, but it wasn't carbon paper. I don't know exactly what it was. Then you would lay that sheet onto the surface of this jelly-like material, and it was 8.5 by 11. It would take a full sheet of typing paper, and that ink would be sucked off the paper into the jelly. Then you could take a white piece of paper and lay it on the jelly, and the image would transfer onto that piece of paper. And you could do a number of copies. I can't remember. It seemed like you could do 20, 30 copies until the ink was exhausted. And then over time, what would happen is that what ink you didn't use would kind of be absorbed into the jelly. And then you could do it again, as the surface kind of cleaned itself. You could apply another one of these sheets and do it again. It was called a hectograph, and it printed pretty nicely. Now, the first half a dozen or 10 copies you made were nice and sharp, but as you went through more copies, then they started to blur, and that's because you used up the ink, and also that ink was in the process of being absorbed into the jelly. But that was my first experience with printing, and it was really cool. And I don't remember what we printed. I think the reason he bought that is because he wanted to do some mail order stuff, and he needed a way to reproduce the material that he was selling mail order. He would run ads in these same magazines and tell people to send $1. As I recall, what he was selling is chemical formulations. He was really smart, and in high school he was named the best chemistry student of the school. That was American International High School in The Hague, Holland. And he was real good in chemistry. Anyway, when we did this, we were considerably younger. And he wrote formulas on how to do different things, explosives and things of that nature. And he would run an ad in Popular Science or Popular Mechanics that says send $1 for a list of formulas, instructions on how to make different things. And I don't remember what they were, but he then reproduced the page which had the formulas typed on it, and then that's what he would send to the people when they made the purchase. I participated marginally on that. You know, I helped with the printing, and I was interested in how he did the sales, but I didn't really. It wasn't a project where we were both involved to that level. I mean, I was on the peripheral of it, but it was an interesting experience nonetheless. The second printer that I remember using was something that, and I don't know if he bought it or I bought it or we bought it or what it was, but it was one of these little printers that you could set rubber type in it, almost like a rubber stamp, but it was individual letters. And it was a little rotary press, and it would ink, and then you'd run like a 3x5 index card through it, and it would print almost like a rubber stamp. And that's something that we use for a variety of things. And I don't know how old I was. I'm thinking I was still in about the sixth, seventh, or eighth grade when we were doing all of that. But I never lost the desire to print things, and throughout the years from that point forward, I learned about mimeographs. I produced a newspaper using a mimeograph when I was in high school, and I learned about I guess you call it ditto, but it was the old blue ink on the white page that would have a funny smell to it when the teachers handed it out to you. I used those kind of presses, and I own a bunch of those presses today, which eventually one day I'll sell them on eBay or something. And then, later on I learned about offset printing, and this was through, when I was in college, I produced a book that was offset printing, and then I also produced a book that was mimeographed. And both of those books did poorly. They didn't sell many copies. One of them was called Window, and the other one was called Peace. And they were short stories and poetry, basically. And gosh, trying to think, in college I did a newspaper that was distributed in the dorm, so the university paid for the printing, or we paid as students, we paid for the printing, but the university did the printing. I can't remember. We turned it into somebody and they printed it for us, and I don't remember how that was done. What process it was? Some kind of office copy machine process. Um, and so I learned about copy machines. I learned about ditto and mimeograph and offset printing. And I even bought an offset printing Chief 15 blue model, which I learned to print on, but I wasn't very good. Printing is a very special skill, and I did print on it, but my printing always left a lot to be desired. It wasn't crisp, clean printing. I had trouble with water balance and all that sort of stuff. I also learned to typeset with lead type, individual letters, upside down and backwards letters, with a Kelsey press. And I printed a lot of stuff with that, actually. I had a kind of a business where I was printing envelopes for people and um, receipt books and things of that nature, letterhead. Um, this is, gosh, back in the 80s, I was doing that. And I had some customers that come back to me all the time and get envelopes printed. And it was pretty fascinating because you could print 100 envelopes pretty darn quickly once you had set the type. Or 500 envelopes, I guess, was the denomination or the number that we used, because that was a box of envelopes, 500, and turn around and sell those at a pretty good price. So it was profitable, and this was just a hand operation. I printed every envelope by hand with the Kelsey press, and uh, this is the same kind of, you call it a letterpress, same kind of press that people used to use years ago to produce newspapers. In book two, I'm thinking book two, or is it book one? It's funny how this stuff blurs together. It's book two, in uh, I Will Find You. There's the sequence of the 1898 newspaper office where people are setting type. Well, the reason I was able to write that sequence was because I've done that. I've set type upside down and backwards. I mean, that's how you set it. And um, I own a bunch of wooden type and a bunch of lead type, and I own a couple Kelsey presses. I own, let's see, two Kluge presses and two C&P, Chandler and Price presses. Um, I'm really serious about printing when I have all this printing equipment. Um, Unfortunately, it's not all under one roof. Someday I'd like to have it all in one place where I can show the evolution of printing equipment and how the different processes have been used over time. Now, of course, all that equipment theoretically is obsolete, because it went from basically lead type set by hand and then went to linotype. And as an aside, once upon a time in Sealy, Texas, a guy offered me for free a linotype machine. I was buying some letterpress materials from him, and he said, "If you want this linotype machine, you can have it." Well, I turned him down because I couldn't figure out how to move something like that. And I regret saying no, because I would love to have a linotype machine just for the historical value. So you go from the handset type to the linotype, and then you go to offset processes. Um, I did, back in the 80s when I produced a newspaper, I did have functional equipment where basically you would type into a computer terminal and it would project light through a film disc and project those letter images um, onto a photographic film. This is a photo typesetting process. and you would have the film come into a little cassette, and then you run the cassette through chemicals in the darkroom, and you would have your copy all typeset. That was used for many, many years by a lot of different newspapers, magazines. And photo typesetting was a huge industry. And so I own, gosh, I hate to even say this, I own 5 photo typesetters. And they're all obsolete. I mean, I'm sure you can't buy the paper, and I'm sure you can't buy the chemicals. But historical value, they're pretty interesting, I think. Well, that then gave way to computer typesetting, desktop publishing. My first computer was a 1980 Radio Shack. After that was a K-Pro. And I actually used the Radio Shack and the K-Pro with printers, dot matrix and daisy wheel or impact printers. And the K-Pro, there was a guy that had invented a process. He owned a print shop, invented a process and sold a electronic box to go from the K-Pro to the photo typesetter. So now you could type, instead of typing into that big old giant terminal at the typesetter, where you type one line at a time, and then it would go into the box, and you'd hear it, you'd hear it printing. You had no chance of correcting. I mean, if you made a mistake, you had to go back and type that line again later. Anyway, this guy created an interface between a K-Pro and the photo typesetter, so you could actually create all your work on the K-Pro on a computer terminal, and then you could feed it to the photo typesetter, and that was a huge time saver. Without that, I probably wouldn't have been able to produce the newspaper I did in the 1980s. If I would have had to type it, one line at a time at the photo typesetter, I probably wouldn't have been successful. So anyway, I had the K-Pro, use that for a long time, and then the next computer that I bought was a Gateway, and that was actually in 1992, and it had laser printer hooked up to it, and so all of that other equipment was instantly made obsolete when you could produce good quality laser photo or typesetting. It wasn't photo typesetting, it was computer typesetting. And I've used Gateway equipment ever since. With Quark Express is the software that I like to use, even though people say, oh, everybody uses InDesign today. I learned Quark in 1992. That's 20 years ago. I know how to use it, and I'm not real anxious to use something else. Even though we actually own InDesign, I don't use it. I just haven't made the transition. What's interesting is that all of this equipment that was used in the last century is totally obsolete because of the computer. You don't see people doing printing and typesetting the way they used to. Yeah, you still have offset printing, and newspaper printing with a web press is still an offset process. But there are so many digital printers today, color digital, and of course they can print black and white digital. I mean, everything has gone electronic hyphen computer, and it's so much better, it's so much quicker, it's so much cleaner. And so even though my newspaper is printed on a press that is, I don't know, I think 60 years old, just standard web press. I think it's a Goss Community, which is pretty popular printing press. And as a matter of fact, I was going to buy those one time. You can pick them up for about $40,000 or $50,000. That has a couple, 2 or 3 heads. Each head allows you to print a certain number of pages, and you can actually buy those since people are going away from them. They're on the market, and they were built to run forever, and they do. If you maintain them, they do run forever. But to justify owning one, you almost need to have a lot of print jobs, and I don't really want to go into the print business. Um, Although I entertained that. I mean, I literally looked at some equipment and looked at the figures, and the amount of money that I've spent on printing a newspaper over the last 15 years, I could have bought several printing presses. Um, I never thought I'd be in the newspaper business this long. I literally thought when I bought it that if I ran it for 5 years, that would be too much. And here it is over 15 years. So anyway, when I'm talking to these printers that print the paperback books, I don't know if they realize that I'm coming to the table with some experience in the printing business. I know what I'm talking about. I didn't know anything about barcodes. I mean, it's not something I've ever done before. Uh, but I know all kinds of other stuff. I mean, in-house here, I can actually print a paperback book and bind it, and I've done that. I've got a perfect binder. I've got paper cutters. I have the ability to print either on photocopy equipment and or with a letterpress or offset press. I mean, I have the capability to produce a book, but my shop is small, and you don't want to produce lots and lots of copies in a small operation because labor will eat you alive. You need to be automated. And that's what these big mass market paperback printers are, is they're automated. I mean, they have huge lines of equipment that you start on one end and out the other end drops finished books. And there's just a guy there gathering the books up, putting them in a carton, stacking them on a pallet to ship to the customer. So anyway, that's kind of an update on the mass market printing. We're still behind schedule. There's a lot of hurdles. Seem like every day something new happens, but eventually we'll get it. And when I get those copies in hand, then I'll start the marketing out to bookstores around the country. Since I did that in the 80s, I kind of know how to do it. Things have changed some. I mean, things are more modernized today, but it's still the same old thing. You've got to create a demand for the product, and then you've got to get people to purchase the product, and then in order to grow it, you've got to have good reviews, and you've got to have word of mouth. You've got to have people saying, yeah, I read that book, it was really great. In this case, it's a series. I like the idea that it's a series. It's not just a single sale, it's 4 sales. Although I'm going to offer the books in a set, you still have, and I learned this from the newspaper business. I produced, gosh, at one time I had 7 mastheads. I was producing 7 newspapers. I'm down to 2 now. But there's an advantage to producing 2 editions. Or back when I was doing 7 editions, there was an advantage to that because the economy of scale, it's cheaper and cheaper to produce more, and yet you can sell, like if you're selling an advertisement, you can sell it into a variety of products and you make more money. So a single book, a single fiction book would be 1 sale. But if you have a series of books that are all tied together and the story lends itself to that, now you're selling 4 books at a time. So you wind up making more money. I mean, it's just that simple. So I kind of learned that from having done it in the newspaper business, and I'm pretty sure it's going to work quite well in the mass market print run. If it doesn't, I'll have a lot of books to put my feet on. But I don't think that's going to be a problem. The test marketing has been so positive. The response has been so good. with the books that I don't have any doubts that we'll be able to sell the first print run fairly quickly, and we'll be talking about additional print runs, again and again and again. Um, so anyway, it's just a matter of time to get those in hand so that I can go out to the mass marketing all over the country, and that will involve sending out review copies and getting on talk shows and convincing book buyers at the various bookstores, including the chains, convincing them that, hey, this is something you need to stock. They've got thousands and thousands of titles. There's many, many, many independent publishers nowadays. Back in the 80s, there weren't as many, and so you were competing with the big boys, the Doubleday and Simon and Schuster, and you name it, Random House, all of those big giant publishers. I mean, they would just dwarf the independent publishers. You just couldn't get anywhere with them. But today, because there's so many independent publishers and some who have produced some pretty successful books, I mean, there's even associations whose charter is to promote independent publishing. It's a completely different world. 20 years is a completely different thing, and so I think it should work pretty well. I don't think it's going to be as difficult as it was back in the 80s to get the books into the hands of the bookstores. So anyway, that's the update. We will proceed as though we have nothing to stop us. I mean, that's kind of been my attitude about this whole thing anyway, is I'm going to just keep forging ahead until something stops me, and I don't think anything's going to stop me. This is going to be successful. There's going to be a lot of readers. The books are going to be changing lives and causing people to think differently about their lives and about their relationships. And I couldn't be happier. I think it's a great project, and I'm having fun doing it.